Hello, everyone. Smatho and Big Hef are back for the DFS Down Under show. This is round 5 of the AFL, and the both of us are brought to you by Daily Fantasy Rankings, Australia's leading AFL Daily Fantasy site for all your projections and tools for DFS Fantasy. I said on Twitter, Hef, that I was going to nail the intro one day, but you can have to wait till next week. How are you today, mate?
You know you can record it again, but it's more fun just listening to how you handle it. I'm good. A bit going on today in terms of fixtures and who's going to be playing where. We got a new game on Thursday night already, but just as we said last week, we just take the games that are dished up and we work out what to do with it, don't we, Smatho?
Yeah, speaking of changes, we've got a new backdrop here for the show today. Would you like to describe what's happening in the Heffernan household?
No, I've decided to channel my inner Bev show and just got the workbench behind me here. But no, I've had to rearrange the house. We're an 18-month-old who doesn't sleep, and we're pulling out all stops, and we've thrown him in the bedroom. I've had to bring the desk in here, working from home. It's just all happening here. It's a bit chaotic like the AFL season, but... yeah, that explains the change of backdrop. I couldn't get the West Coast Eagles jersey in the background, but the way they're going at the moment, that's not a bad thing, I don't think.
Yes, you might want to just hide that for quite a while. Also, thoughts and prayers for all the guys who are now stuck in lockdown for the next 4 weeks in Victoria. So make sure you subscribe to the Daily Fantasy Rankings YouTube channel, and there's always these fresh content for round 5 coming up. So tonight, also today, Hef and I are going to look at round 5, the first 2 games of the AFL fixture as it stands for now. But as always, before we get stuck into the footy, it is time for Schmatho's 2 thumbs up. And Hef, man, there was plenty of winners again over the weekend. Tough for nominations for this week, but let me run through a couple there for you. Look, how hard is it on Friday? Cleaning up on Draftstars was a worthy nomination, but doesn't get my thumbs up this week. Look, the duo, Brody and Chris Eddy, the former number 1 ranked DFR players, they cleaned up on Saturday as well, but not quite over the line for me here. We had international winners on DraftKings, including Cybrit and Neo Dave, who did pretty well cleaning up there. I am Maximus with the single bullet on Draftstars, nearly got over the line, but for my 2 thumbs up this week, I'm going to throw it to the chop that happened on DraftKings on Thursday night. DFR members Crystal Brothers, or Crystal Bros, and Mango 27491, also known as Bradley, bring up their lineup here for us, Hef. They chopped out the DraftKings contest. They both took home $13,750. Here's Brad's team here. Take us through this winning lineup from last Thursday.
Well, it looks very up and down, this lineup, with the exception of Bailey Dale. 4%, 74, 4.4K. That's a beautiful lineup. Look at that. No one else was under 20%. This sort of goes back to a point we sort of touched on last year when we were talking some sort of general lineup tips of you don't have to totally get away from all the chalk, but you've just got to make sure you've got a little point of difference there. And yeah, that's come through there for Mango with Bailey Dale, his new favourite player, I'm sure.
I also like the Liberatore and the row bottom plays there. Just getting that 64, 65 point now is very, very handy at that particular value. And then our boy now, we've got some feedback during the week that we're giving him a bit of shtick, and now that's 2 weeks in a row that Tim English has come through for the goods. Do you have anything to apologise to viewers for Tim English's fantasy output in the last 2 weeks?
Well, that's a little bit harsh. I didn't have a go at him last week. I actually liked Tim English, but I'm a bit more upset about Sam Naismith doing the knee. He gave English an absolute walloping in the ball ups and the bounces. He was just winning all those taps, but English is just like another midfielder on the ground. And what he gives away in the ruck, it doesn't really hurt him in terms of fantasy if he's getting the ball himself. So yeah, okay, we might have had a bit to say about English, but I think we've been more harsh and more wrong with other players. Don't worry about that.
Oh, yes. we're not in the expert field of nailing all our players. We're just highlighting some players that could be rubbish.
I'm getting pretty sick of you sending me messages about my fade every week too, Smatho. Going absolutely off their head. Bontempelli was one we got wrong, but I'm blaming Horse Longmire for that. Fancy not tagging Bontempelli. You got your right whack horse.
Fair enough. But speak of the 2 thumbs up. I've got to congratulate Mango and Crystal Brothers. They're out there, folks. Give them the 2 thumbs up for us now. And then back towards me. Here we go. 2 thumbs up to you guys. Well done on your massive win on Thursday night.
Then I just want to chime in. That's controversial. Single bullet on Draftstars didn't get the 2 thumbs up. You know I love the single bullets.
I love it too.
He's got 10,000 to wipe his tears up with Iron Maximus or whatever he won.
It's tough. You get a 2 thumbs up from Reed. Now this year with 2 sites going Cocoa Bananas, you've done very well. Even get a nomination. Just think you get a nomination from Smatho, you've done well. All right, Hef. 2 big games this week, it turns out to be some Melbourne-based teams. Let's start with Thursday night, which is going to be St Kilda versus Carlton now at Marvel Stadium. Early markets have St Kilda at $1.65 with the Blues at $2.25. The spread's 7.5. And currently the total's 124.5. It's a bit of a trend now that these point totals are starting to get lower and lower as the season goes along. I think the bookies in this now are just realising that teams don't score many points as they used to with these shortened quarters. In terms of the fantasy contest, we both got DraftKings up with the $50,000 sticks contest for an $11 entry, and then Draftstars have come out with a $75,000 feature, and the $10,000 $2 mini is back to popular man. In team news, Carlton are already missing Jack Silvani after copying one in the sweet spot from Zach Merritt. Zach Jones should be out as he did his hamstring and a short turnaround for the Saints. Keep an eye on Jake Gresham. He copped one in the eye last week, so he may be in or maybe not. I'm not sure. Paddy Ryder was a late out last week, which kind of opened up our Saturday slate. But we've got to monitor if he's going to come back in after Rowan Marshall did a pretty good job on Saturday. Hef, initial thoughts for this particular slate as we get into round 5 AFL?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting what they do with Paddy Ryder. Clearly, Marshall thrived last year when he was one out in the ruck, and these ruckmen, they never really seem to respond to the 2 ruck setup. Even as good as Marshall and Ryder are at playing forward, they're better than your usual ruckman who rests forward. These guys can genuinely hold a position down up forward. So obviously, if Ryder comes back in, that really hurts Marshall's output. Zach Jones, with him not playing, that opens up a spot in the centre bounces for the Saints. And if Gresham doesn't play either, then that just opens up a heap of room through the middle for someone to capitalise. One guy who won't be capitalising is Luke Dunstan, who's apparently ripped a pec muscle, and he's out for 3 months as well. So he's a guy that may have been in line to come in for Zach Jones, so you won't see him. So, as always, these team announcements are going to be pretty interesting. Carlton look pretty settled, though, for once. Your boys, Smatho?
Great win against the Bombers on Saturday night. So, obviously, that 1 point Falcon saving win was pretty good. You mentioned about the midfield for the Saints. Look, I'm looking at the CBA numbers, and, we've got Zach Jones who had 15 last week and Jake Gresham with 10. Yeah, there's going to be some opportunity for the Saints midfield, but as you said, the Carlton is quite settled with Pittenay, Cripps and Curnow just dominating the middle. So let's look at the rucks though, first of all. So obviously we talked about Marshall-Ryder combination could be in the works. That would lean a bit of Pittenay in your lineups?
If they run with the 2 ruckman there, the Saints, then I would lean to Pittenay just because that's the way we tend to go. If you've got a 1 out ruckman against 2 guys, then it's just easier for the 1 out guy to make value. I'm really hoping Ryder doesn't play here because Rowan Marshall's got forward status there on Draftstars, and I really want to play your favourite move here, the double ruck stack. Not a whole lot of forwards that excite me from these 2 teams, so combine that with Marshall and Pittenay. They do tend to give up a lot of points to the opposition rucks when they play, so they would almost be capitalising on each other here. And yeah, if I can get both of these guys into my lineup, I'll be very happy to do so if Ryder isn't playing. Now, obviously, DraftKings, we don't have that option. The way they're priced, Marshall's just a tick under 1,000 more than Pittonet. I think that's probably pretty fairly priced for the both of them, so I find it hard to split them at those price points. But yeah, really keen to play both here on Draftstars.
I'm also keen on in the defence here, Sam Doherty for the Blues. 15,900 is just that price point that just tempting to get him in. I know there's a bit of cash already gone in your ruck or double ruck stack already. Are we looking in Doherty and someone else, or can we pivot to other options?
Well, we've got some cheap options that we can link with Doherty if we want to go down this path. There's a guy like Tom Williamson who seems to have a lot of raps on him in amongst Carlton supporters, and he had a nice 64 last week and might be starting to show what he's capable of. Jack Nunes is another one who's priced under 8,000 there on Draftstars, who sort of moved back with that injury to Nick Newman. He's always been a bit of a wing halfback flank sort of player. So linking one of these guys with Doherty seems to make a lot of sense. Two things I'll mention. DraftKings, he's much more expensive there, Doherty. He's 9,300. We can sort of equate that through to Draftstars because the half the salary there on DraftKings, it'd be like playing him at 18,000 on Draftstars. It's just a really massive salary, and it's quite well done there from DraftKings. It makes you really think about what you're going to do there with Doherty. And the other thing we've got to talk about is what is St Kilda going to do with Jonathan Marsh? We've seen very controversial in the DFS world is Roland Grimes last week. Is he going to go to Doherty maybe?
That could be the case, but that also will open up Cade Simpson to return to his kind of particular role. So, it's worth some thought, especially with St Kilda defence has been actually I wouldn't say tunning up, but they've been pretty active fantasy scorers. They did the job over Collingwood, and then also they did the job over Richmond. You know, blokes like Carlisle, you talk about Marsh, he scored 65 points last week. So, could we pivot to Saints backs and just trust the data from there?
Yeah, well, obviously they've got Nick Caulfield as well, who's put a couple of scores together there, a highly rated young player who might just be starting to pick up the pace. We've been talking about there's some room for possibly a couple of players out of that centre bounce rotation. So a guy like Hunter Clark, who's been really good the sort of last 6 months of his career, it might be an opportunity to put Hunter Clark through the midfield a bit more. So he's priced up pretty well there at 12,000 on Draftstars, but he's such a good user of the ball, and he's just got a heap of talent, Hunter Clark. Maybe there's a little option for him to go in the middle there too. So, there's plenty of options, but I do think Doherty, that's your main decision there. It's a little bit scary. The last couple of weeks we've misfired on a couple of tags, and that's really cost us. But if Marsh does go to Doherty, he doesn't usually get a lot of attention, Doherty, and that would really throw the cat amongst the pigeons, I think.
All right, so let's move on to the midfield. And obviously, I was looking at my main man, Sam Walsh, last week because he was having a bit of a down season, the old second-year Blues, but he came back with the goods with a 90-point effort. So I can't really ignore him at his price point this week on both sites. Look, but however, with the Saints' injuries and being favourites, I might have to attack their midfield instead. So who should I look at for the Saints or even for the Blues there, Hef?
Yeah, well, as we've sort of mentioned with Jones and Gresham out, that opens up a lot of opportunity through the Saints midfield. Like Dunstan would have been an obvious one to come in, so he won't. You've got to wonder how much depth there actually is there at the Saints to bring guys in. So maybe they restrict that centre bounce rotation they have. And if they do so, the guy that's probably going to cash in on all this is Seb Ross. He's in there just 11,000 on Draftstars. So he's a guy that we were playing at sort of 15,000 last year, and he was really thriving on just being given that inside role for the whole game. He's a little bit more expensive over there on DraftKings at 7,000, but I think that's probably still reasonable. Jones had definitely taken away some of his inside work. But I'm going to check the teams. But if it looks like Ross is going to be a major part of this midfield, then definitely on Draftstars he's way underpriced. On that note too, I think Jack Steele gets plenty of opportunity. I'm pretty sure he's going to go to Cripps. I don't think that's necessarily a massive worry for Cripps, but it still isn't ideal. But the thing about Steele, when he gets given a role like this, he's not scared to get the ball himself. He's a wonderful tackler. So at sub 15,000 on Draftstars, he does have a massive ceiling when he gets these type of jobs. I think he's going to be in there the whole game, and for that reason, I'm very happy to play him as well. If Gresham does play, we've seen him get a lot more time through the midfield this season, and still only 11,000. I think there's upside for Gresham, and then guys like Hill and Billings are going to keep those wing roles, and I think they've shown, especially Billings, that they've got the ceilings to capitalise on that as well. In terms of Carlton, I think this is more where we get some of our cheaper options. A guy like Will Setterfield is still under 10K. He's not setting the world alight, but he's still got that right role. So maybe there's going to be one game where Setterfield finally clicks and gets you a bit of an edge over everyone else. The thing about Carlton is they have a really settled rotation. We know Cripps is going to be in there. We know Ed Curnow is going to be in there. He's actually quite cheap, under 13,000, Ed Curnow. With no obvious target for his tag, actually. Maybe that's just a little worry for Seb Ross if Ed Curnow goes there, but personally I wouldn't be tagging Seb Ross. We've noticed that Mark Murphy's been sort of moved out of the middle to more a flanking, winging type role, which has given the opportunity for Jack Martin to get in the centre bounces a bit more. And finally, a guy like Michael Gibbons, who we can also play up forwards, he's put 3 70-plus scores together. It's a bit of a battler, Gibbons, but you can't underestimate that scoring that he's putting together. So I don't think the salary is caught up to him too much either.
Yep, Gibbons will be pretty popular. Also, that could be possibly popular if the Saints bring one of their 2 rookies that they played pretty well last week in a scratch match. Their names are Ryan Burns and Jack Beitel. So they're both at 5,000 on Draftstars, around 293K on DraftKings. So they become a very good salary saver if they do play, and then obviously you can link up Doherty in that full double ruck stack as well. But
yeah, I like that. If one of those guys comes in, I think you're all over it there, Smatho.
All right, well, let's move on the forwards. And then, look, there's plenty of dual position options here. So we've already touched on those particular players there. Is anyone with just the forward status only that you might want to sneak at low ownership?
Well, there's a guy for St Kilda, Tim Membry, who I'm a little bit reluctant because we've sort of missed the boat on him here. He got the 85 last week, and that price tag is 9,000 on Draftstars. Obviously, an 85 is a huge return there, but 4,900 on DraftKings. Like he's so well priced on DraftKings for his ceiling. The problem is he's probably going to be. He's not going to get missed at that price with the 85 there in the record books from last week. It doesn't mean he's not a good play. It's just not as exciting to play as maybe he would have been if he got 40 last week. In terms of straightforward for Carlton, David Cunningham, I'm sure he got you excited last week, Smatho. He had a ripper game. Still with us?
Yeah, I'm still here. Yeah, David Cunningham. He had a brilliant game. He nearly turned up last week. I've got a question for you, Hef, and I kind of missed this on the notes before. Who is the 3rd highest fantasy scoring player for Carlton through 4 rounds of this season? I'll give you a clue. It's not Cripps and it's not Curnow.
Yeah, I didn't need that clue.
And it's not Doherty either. There you go.
It's not Doherty. It's
Levi Casbolt. So through 4 rounds, if you click on his name right now, he's currently averaging 73.8 fantasy points, 94 last week and 73 the week before. Had an 82 in round 1 as well. He's just clunking marks. He's actually getting into the ruck as well. He's been doing the backup ruckman, so if he does dry up in marks and goals, he's still got a little bit of a flaw there. 11,500 on Draftstars, and let me check out on DraftKings how much he is there.
He's much better on DraftKings. He's there at 5,200.
52. So, low-owned, forward-only, not a dual position. I like a bit of Casbolt, but he probably sink me this week.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, if you go to bed on Thursday night and you've just paid 11,500 for Levi Casbolt and he's giving you a nice 40 or 50, you're going to have a lot of trouble getting to sleep, I reckon. DraftKings, that's a very reasonable price. I think he's priced up here on Draftstars personally, especially given the Saints have been quite strong down back this season. They haven't given up too much to his type of player, I don't think. So I hear what you're saying. Not sure how much upside there is on Draftstars, though.
Fair enough. One final player I want your thoughts on is Dan Butler. Forward only, 6,000 on DraftKings. He's been priced up to 12,900 on Draftstars.
He's sort of the same, Dan Butler, although we don't have as big a body of work with him being his first year in St Kilda colours, but just going on Butler's role and his history, 12,900. Geez, I think.
Is this your fade of the week? Is this your fade of the show?
Well, Dan Butler hopes that this is my fade of the week because that'll really top him off for another huge game. 3 80s in a row, but the thing at 12,900, if he gets an 80, well, it's not really going to hurt us if we don't have him. I don't think. I'd prefer to fade him at 12-9.
Well, very good.
I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid yet on Dan Butler. Dan Butler, yeah, he's obviously got a better role than what he had at Richmond from a fantasy perspective. But look, you can pay 12-9 for Ed Curnow, and he's just going to be in the guts all game. So I'd give me Curnow over Butler every day of the week there.
Excellent. All right, let's move on to Friday night footy, and we've got the traditional clash between Collingwood and Essendon. Collingwood are pretty short at the moment at $1.36, but that might have changed since the time of recording here. If we had some late breaking news on Tuesday night with a couple of players from Collingwood. Bombers at $3.15. Yeah. Spread's currently 16.5, and we've got a low total of 117.5. We've got some forecast rain and showers in Melbourne on Friday. Currently 90% chance there at the moment. So just keep an eye on that throughout the week, and especially on Friday. If the total starts creeping up, then the weather's looking pretty good. In terms of the fantasy contest, Draftstars have come out with the $100,000 contest on Friday night. DraftKings will release their contest later on this week. In team news, we lost Zach Merritt to suspension, but we should get back Connor McKenna after his crazy 2 weeks in isolation. The Pies lose Jeremy Howe to a gruesome knee injury on Friday night last week, but Adam Treloar got through a scratch match and should line up for the Pies. Hef, traditional rivals, usually Collingwood would have the number on the Bombers over the last few years, especially on Anzac Day. The market suggests another Collingwood win regardless of Jeremy Howe's injury. What are you thinking so far with our boy Brodie Grundy first up in the ruck?
Oh, yeah, just than Adam Treloar. It's felt like Armageddon's coming for the Collingwood midfield with Treloar. We've been waiting for him to come in, and he's just going to cause all sorts of havoc to what they've really got settled. Everyone knows the stat with Taylor Adams, how his output's affected by Treloar coming back. Rupert Wills is another guy potentially impacted there, but there's guys like DeGoey. Jamie Elliott got a lot of centre bounce work last week. Treloar's about to come back in and shake all that up. So that's something we've got to think about when we talk about the midfield a bit later on. But in the rucks, Brodie Grundy, wow. It just looks so... Everyone's telling me Bell Chambers is cooked. It looks so easy that Grundy's far too good for Bell Chambers. Why is it that I always get nervous playing guys against Bell Chambers, Smatho? Is it because he did a number on Natanui a couple of years ago and I'm still scarred?
How's your bias? You can't seem to shake that off.
There's two guys that have got a hold of Natanui over there in WA, Tom Bell Chambers and Tom Hickey. So I really hope we don't see Bell Chambers signing with West Coast next year after they brought Hickey over for the same reason. But look.
But, man, this price point for Bell Chambers at $8,690.
Exactly. Well, we've got the option to play Mason Cox there too. We might leave him for the forwards, but that's a big difference there. He's a big lad, Bill Chambers. I don't think Grundy's quite the lock that we might think. Now, Grundy's obviously going to score a lot more than Bill Chambers, but not only has he got to score $8,000 worth more than Bill Chambers, but we know how much we can spend on Collingwood through the midfield. Although Trelaw's going to hurt that a bit, but I don't know. There is something to say that the money you save here on Bill Chambers, you might be able to put to better use. I don't know. It's easy to lock in Grundy, but let's be honest. Is that going to win us a tournament?
Well, he was 75% owned last week on Draftstars.
I thought he should have been 90% last week.
But that won't be the case. With that $8,000 for Bill Chambers, you'll get a lot of people who click that to jam in these mids, especially from Collingwood.
Yeah, that's a fair call. If there's rain forecast, it's two ways of looking at that, like there is with a lot of things, but it generally suits Ruckman when we have rain because we get more stoppages, and obviously they're right in the middle of all the stoppages. Does rain potentially hurt Grundy's work around the ground a bit more than your normal Ruckman? Possibly. One thing we should talk about rain, though, with the MCG, if it's not going to rain during the game, that the ground just drains so well that it's not even worth worrying about if it rains beforehand. So it's only really going to impact the game if it rains during the game.
Okay. All right, let's move on to defence. So with Jeremy Howe now gone for the season, who is this main man at Collingwood going to step up in terms of that link, third man up kind of role, getting that plus sixes down back? Or should we look at more at trusting the DFR data? We've been harping on about Collingwood's fantasy points against. Saints took advantage of it. The Giants took advantage of it last week. We've got guys like Sard and Hurley and Francis, who could achieve some good ceiling scores here. So do we find the value in the pies, or should we trust the data with the Bombers?
Yeah, I'm really torn here, actually. Howe does leave plenty of points up for grabs, and they're going to have to bring someone in to replace him. One guy on the radar is a bit of a favourite of mine, Matt Scharenberg. I'll be honest, I've got no idea if he's anywhere near getting named or not. He's had horrible injuries. He's not as exciting and as free-flowing as Jeremy Howe, but he's also priced at 7,000. So when you compare him with a guy like Roughhead, Madgen, who potentially could come back in, even Darcy Moore, who's up sort of the $8,000 mark, he tends to have a bit of a higher ceiling than those guys, Scharenberg. So if he plays, I'm on watch for him. There's a bit of talk about Darcy Moore potentially playing that Howe role. We know he's a great mark, Moore. So I think he would be capable if they let him off the leash a bit. But and the fact that Essendon doesn't really have a big forward to worry about, that would sort of imply that there is a good chance for Moore to be released. So that's interesting as well. This is all a bit of guesswork, though, obviously. There's not one guy that I'm really keen to lock in. I'm just going to play around with... I'm going to play around with just defenders that will fit my lineup build. When we look at Essendon, really worried about some of Essendon's backs. Kale Hooker's looking really slow. He's only 7,000 still, Hooker, and we know he's got a big ceiling. So sometimes these guys we think look cooked. Everyone else does. They come up low owned and the ball falls in their lap a few times. And next thing you know, he's got 80 at 7,000. He's won someone a contest. So Hurley's looking a bit the same. We know they like to get it to Hurley, but a young guy who's really made his mark for Essendon is Jordan Ridley. He's up to 11,000, but the way he's been scoring recently, 3 games over 60, it's given him a pretty decent floor at that price. He's one of the few guys on the up in that Essendon back line that's probably worth looking at.
So let's talk about the studs in the midfield. Obviously, we touched about this last week. We got a lot of Ferraris from the Collingwood midfield. We're possibly going to be missing one. We've still sidebottom decided to breach protocol. So we've got to keep an eye on that particular space. There's breaking news here on DFR's Down Under Show. So But the Bombers now, they don't have Merritt. Treloar possibly back. It's going to be pretty hard work for the Essendon mids, but is there any leads here in the mids since we're going to try and save some cash for this particular spot?
Yeah, well, we've got to try and work out how these teams are going to structure up, I guess. The thing about Zach Merritt this year is he hasn't attended many centre bounces, so they've been really settled through there, and they've almost been looking to get Merritt a bit behind the ball. One guy who's firmly planted in the midfield who hasn't been there before is Andrew McGrath. The issue with that is we've got to pay $14,000 for him here. He's the highest bomber on the slate, and he just hasn't shown the fantasy output to be worthy of that high price tag. I don't think. I'd much prefer to play a guy like Dylan Shield, who has a proven ceiling. He's obviously going to be playing through the middle as much as he likes, and we can get him for about $600 cheaper. So he's my preferred option there from Essendon. But they've had a really jumbled sort of midfield setup. A guy like Darcy Parish, who everyone thought that he was about to really rip it apart after that big last quarter he had against Sydney, and then he didn't get to go in the midfield again. He's a real boom or bust player because if he plays up forward, he's basically useless in terms of fantasy Parish. But if they happen to release him in the midfield, say they gave him Merritt's role through the midfield and getting a bit behind the ball, then at 10,000 he would have the potential to be a slate breaker, I think, Darcy Parish. So there's question marks there for Essendon. In terms of Collingwood, we mentioned Treloar coming back just to ruin mainly Taylor Adams, but now with these COVID, what do we call, suspensions coming through, still side bottom, then getting a sneaky Uber. I think he was going around having a couple of cheekies with Dan Wells. If he's not going to be there side bottom, that opens up one wing. And there's a guy that I'm looking at called Chris Mayne, who's hot off a 28 up there at Sydney. We've seen what Mayne has been capable of, though, when, especially playing in Melbourne when he's running off a wing. And at sub 10K, he's a guy that I'm always going to be sprinkling into my tournament lineups with the upside that he's shown. But, all of a sudden, Taylor Adams at 15,000, Pendlebury 15,000. There's more ball that's going to go around with Treloar coming back in, and it just sort of makes everyone a touch overpriced, I think.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't really see anyone at value as well. We've got David Zacharakis now at 7,980. I mean, he was a tease at 8K last week, and he only produced how much? He produced 57, which is in the end achieved his value, but
that's he's almost in that KO hooker bracket here, Zaharakis. I think everyone knows by this stage that he's looking cooked, and you think, I can't play him. He's no good. These cook guys, they still have a little bit left, and they bob up once or twice. So, not a guy that I'd want to be anchoring my team around by any stretch. But
is he okay in the wet if he goes wet? Or will you just be like half forward pocket style? Well,
it looks like he's got that half forward role, which isn't. It's not a great role if you're struggling to get the footy by any stretch of the imagination. But I don't know. He did kick a winning goal on Anzac Day in the wet, didn't he?
But that was like 10 years ago now. So you can hang your hat on that. But I think it would be so hard not to have him as your fourth mid or your second forward. But you never know. You just never know. Let's move on to the forwards. And you mentioned Mason Cox before. You love your second up players, as you told me. How did that go last week with Lockie Ash? He kind of didn't do much. So,
I'm glad GWS isn't on this show because I'd probably have to go again on Lockie Ash with Zach Williams out. But
just
let's not put that on the record.
Look, Cox was pretty rusty. Then he obviously bobbed up pretty late and managed to score some handy fantasy points at the end, but. Is he going to be better for the run, or do we have to monitor the weather considering that wet and the Cox don't go well together?
Don't know where you're going with that, Smatho. No. But look, he's not going to get worse than last week because he was pretty rubbish, let's be honest. We've got to be very careful what we say with a few American viewers tuning in now, Smatho. But as Well, as rusty as he looked last week, like you say, 44 at that $7,000 price tag. It's not the end of the world by any stretch. The forecast rain, it's going to be a tough one for Cox because he has trouble marking at the best of times when he's not in touch. And a slippery ball's definitely not up his alley. The only possible benefit I could see from that is when he gets some time in the ruck, and we know that greasy conditions can help the ruckman. But with these shortened quarters, he's not getting a whole lot of time in that ruck position with Grundy around. So, like you say, he was that bad against a pretty good team last week in GWS and still got basically value, for want of a better term. So I don't think he's a bad player, but I'm not rushing to play.
Guy who's actually cheaper is Jacob Townsend. Could have been the match winner last week. He did score 31. Could have been 36, I guess. I suppose if you kick that goal. 5,500. Does that just plug him in again, or let the field take him?
That's so cheap, isn't it? He's only got to get you
40 points.
Yeah, 40 points. Now, a wet game in theory could really suit Townsend because he is a rough nut. He went from this very limited battler in the middle of the ground. Then somehow he turned up at Richmond and took 100 marks on and kicked 100 goals in 2 games out of nowhere. And now he's sort of a hybrid tall forward, centre, undersized centre half forward. I don't know what he is, Townsend, but I reckon a battler like him, he's a good tackler, so wet conditions would be up his alley. Yeah, 5,500, I don't think he can possibly be a bad player, but again, he's not a guy I'm rushing to play by any stretch. Trying to find someone that is worth playing. I heard a bit of talk about Will Hoskin-Elliott potentially filling that Jeremy Howe role, which seems extremely ambitious to me. Have you heard any of those whispers?
No, and this is the first time I've heard of it. So do tell.
I'm a bit scared to go with this because you're usually on the pulse with everything. And my source, he's probably not the most... No, I'm not going to say that because he'll be watching the show. My source is usually on the mark here, so Will Hoskin-Elliott. But if there's some greasy conditions, I don't think that would suit anyone trying to play a Jeremy Howe role. But we have seen Hoskin-Elliott getting up on the wings. He does have a big ceiling, Hoskin-Elliott. Already this year we've seen he's produced a couple of 70s, so at 8,200s, that's a wonderful return. But he also has the ability to just totally decimate your lineup with just a disgraceful score. So he's boom or bust, Hoskin-Elliott. But like we saw in Thumbs Up, Bailey Dale is very boom or bust, and he won a contest. So there's the guys we need to dabble in, and I think he is worth dabbling in.
Very, very good. Make sure you subscribe to our Daily Fantasy Rankings YouTube channel because Hef and I will be back with previews for DraftKings contests for Thursday night and Friday night games. Make sure you also get to dailyfantasyrankings.com.au for Jesse Penfold's slate previews. The data tools will be updated very soon. They'll be all updated on the site for our projections. The lineup builder is there for Draftstars as well, so it's all there for your AFL daily fantasy needs. You can also jump over to rotogrinders.com. We have our slate previews and the DFR projections into their lineup builder called Lineup HQ, so make sure you get in there if you're playing DraftKings contests. Hef and I will be back for hopefully round 6 of the AFL. We're going to be talking possibly fixtures in different cities and different states, and Victoria are in absolute lockdown. So do join us for the next edition of the DFR Down Under show.